iHOP has begun. Good evening, everyone. How's everyone been doing? I know my title, I'm quoting Yoda, but I did Palpatine's voice. Can't do Yoda's voice. Plus, Palpatine's voice sounds cooler. I'm not expecting many people to actually hop on, but I just thought I would try it out. Go live. Late night. Let's see how this goes. How's everyone been doing? No one's here yet, but once they're here, I'm sure they will talk about a lot. Uh, Man, my EU reading has been slow. I have I'm about 100 pages in the Bloodlines. I don't know. The story's not bad. It's just, I don't know if I'm just in a slog sort of feeling or I don't know. It's strange. Because this year I've not read very much. I've read the Dark Knight trilogy, Betrayal, um, Bounty Hunter Wars. I know I read that. I think I read Shadows of the Empire too. Um, I've read a few comics here and there. I mean, I just haven't read a lot this year. It hasn't been very good. Um, it hasn't been good reading wise, but and if you're curious about the title, I recently started working at iHOP. So, and one of my Discord members, Madison is her name, she's like, can't wait to see Lance's IHOP era or something like that, and that kind of just stuck. So once I said I was gonna start working there, um, like it so far. I started training yesterday, and it's been pretty good so far. Management's been good. Coworkers seem fine so far. Don't have too many complaints. I'm gonna be working more evenings though, because that's when I'm free most of the time is during the evenings, the afternoons. So not really during the mornings, but anyway, I'm excited to see where it goes. Oh, looky here, look who it is. My boy,
What's going on, Lance? How are you?
Johnson. What's up, man? How are you doing?
I've been better. I'm upset with TD Bank. They closed my account. I just opened it Friday, and
Why did they close your account? What'd you do?
I have no idea. I have no idea. And I had direct deposit set up, so I have to switch that now and go visit a branch to reopen it. Hopefully tomorrow. I don't know how I'm going to do that, but hopefully I'll try to get over there because
I
can't go
mean,
Thursday.
I use Chase Bank. Am I misunderstanding maybe what you're saying? I don't. Are you changing banks?
Yeah, I did change banks on Friday, and I switched my
Okay.
direct deposit. So they closed it.
And then
Like
they shut your account down.
yeah, I just set it up, and like 2 days later they close it. Probably because it has a zero balance. But hey, I don't get paid till Friday. So,
Yeah, that's probably why.
but 2 days. I mean, really, like you don't even get your debit card in 2 days.
Yeah, yeah, 2 days is a little too long, for sure.
That doesn't make any
I
sense.
don't know. I'm using Chase, and I've been using. Well, my mom, she's been using it for years, so I'm using it. I don't know. Have you tried Chase?
Um, there's not a Chase near me.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. It's a great bank, though.
Yeah.
Well, I was just talking about my lack of EU that I've read. not been fun.
I can't bring myself to read Supernatural Encounters. It's pretty sad. After a half a decade of hyping it up and carrying the banner, now I have no interest in reading it. how how
Well, I
sad is
have
that?
interest. It's just I just have other stuff to read first, and then convincing myself of starting it because that's see. I'm also kind of not concerned, but um, I'm I guess concerned is the right word. I don't want to hurt my book because I have a paperback and books that size that aren't really supposed to be paperbacks. So I don't even know how I'm gonna read it without destroying it.
Yeah, I mean,
Or maybe not destroying it, that's probably an exaggeration, but you know what I mean.
yeah, it's rough. I, I I used to have like disposable reading copies of some books, but obviously with Supernatural Encounters, it's different. Um,
Right.
because I'd bend the spines and it would look kind of ratty on the shelf afterwards. So I mean, it's
See,
paperback books. They're really cheap, so it really doesn't matter to
yeah.
have a reading copy.
Well, I was trying to put Supernatural Encounters on my shelf, but the book is so big, and of course the books because I only have I most of my books are paperbacks anyway. The Del Rey paperbacks and Bantam, they're all tiny, like pocket books. So I tried putting it on the shelf, but like half the book was like leaning over on itself because it's just so heavy. So I had
Hmm.
to just throw it at the top of my shelf. So like it's just laying flat on the top of my shelf.
Yeah,
So because I don't want it to get damaged.
I had to adjust the shelves to make sure all my books have clearance, right? So
Right.
the Dark Forces ones are particularly troublesome because those are the tallest. And then you have crazy books like the coffee table size cross section books. Those I have to lay flat or throw them on top of the shelf, but everything else fits horizontally.
Look at you, Mr. Fancy, getting cross section books or whatever. What books did you say?
The cross section books. So these haven't come out in a while, but like for the original trilogy, they had DK cross section books. So basically, the prequel trilogy and the classic trilogy.
Gotcha.
Uh,
I don't have any of that stuff. I don't have any role playing books or source books like that.
yeah,
I really. Well, it's
it's
not that I haven't gotten into it. It's just first of all, I don't know anything about RPGs in general. Two, those are expensive now, so I just
I
don't have any.
yeah, I think the guy that used to write them, I think it was David West Reynolds, the same guy who wrote the for the Dig magazine. He used to do the cross section books, but I don't think he's active anymore. That's why he didn't do it for the sequel trilogy. But those used to be big, just like the behind the scenes books and the making of films. You'd have a cross section book for each of the films.
Interesting. I do want to get into that, more. I don't know if obscure is the right word, but actually I saw this is months, probably years ago now. I kind of kicked myself for this, but my local half price books actually had a Weston Games book, Star Wars role playing book, and I don't remember which one it was, but I didn't buy it. And the more I think about it, the more stupid I feel because I should have bought it because it was cheap too, but I just didn't buy it.
What kind of role playing? Like how old are we talking?
What? What do you mean?
How old? Like what was it? Wizards of the Coast? Was it
Oh
Fantasy?
no, it was Weston Games.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah, that is old.
Yeah, it was WEG. It was an oldie,
Mm,
but if
yeah,
I'm gonna want any role playing stuff, it's Weston Games because I feel like that's had the most lore impact. Not that the other stuff didn't, but
Yeah, I even even when I got my books, there were hardly any in stores. Like I mostly got mine online later on. There was
Yeah.
the Tapenade, like the Lords of the Expanse books. I got at Borders Bookstore, which doesn't exist anymore. And I think there was one other one. Forget what it was. Was it Far Orbit Project, something like that?
Hmm.
But yeah,
Hmm.
those were tough to find, and I remember the Lords of the Expanse in particular. It doesn't really feature the Star Wars logo, like the Player's Guide to Tapany, one of the supplements to that. It looks like it's Star Wars, and Star Wars is in very little letters on the top, but it's like I was looking at the shelf, and it was like it wasn't in the Star Wars section. So I was like, "Is this even Star Wars?" You have to do a double take on it because it's really sketchy artwork, and they have lightsabers and stuff and droids and stuff, but it doesn't look like anything super official for someone who's not familiar with it.
That sounds interesting for sure.
But
Oh man, I don't even know what I thought about. I don't know what to read comic wise because I finished Darth Vader and the Ghost Prison.
oh, that's a
It's
good one.
pretty good,
Yeah,
but I
that's
don't know
that.
what to because I always like to read a comic with a book that I'm reading, but I don't
So
know.
did you finish the Darth Vader series? The other ones aren't as good, but Darth Vader and the Lost Command. That's
I have
another
read
great
that
one.
one, but I have not read the Ninth Assassin because I don't have that one. I have the other two,
Oh,
but I don't have the Ninth Assassin.
okay. So
Is
you
there
read
another
the
one?
I think there's like five. There's Ninth Assassin, there's Cry of Shadows, and I think there's one more.
I have to
But
look them up. I'm not sure.
you read the
I have
best
two
two.
of them,
The two you read are the best two.
and it's interesting. And I've talked about this before, but those Darth Vader comics, the trades were all in hardback. And you just know that's a moneymaker for Dark Horse. That's why they put it in hardback because it made more money.
Yeah, they didn't even
So
come out with single issues on that. It was all just straight
they didn't.
hardcover. Yep, just like Force Unleashed, it was straight to trade paperback. Although it's not a trade paperback, it's hardcover. So yeah,
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
the only single issues they have of those are the ones made for like school libraries. They're also hardcover, but they're really thin because they're just like one issue. They do have those for that as single issues, but they're hardcover.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. But Cry of
But they're real
Shadows,
nice.
I forget. Cry of Shadows, I think, is like Clone Wars, like flashbacks. And Ninth Assassin, there's something to do with like the Death Star, and you had some yet alternative way that they built the Death Star, or somebody had involvement of how they built the Death Star. It was kind of like stepping on the toes of the stories that had come before. Kind of frustrating.
Well, what I like so much about those comics is you're seeing an early version of Vader where he's still like, okay, he's Vader now, but he's still Anakin and so many I mean he's always Anakin in his own, he's always been there, but that's the most Anakin we've seen Vader,
Well,
and I
yeah,
think is
and
really cool.
the first one, Last Command, or Darth Vader and the Lost Command, that one came right after the Purge comics, so it was right off the heels of Episode 3. So
Yes.
that has more of the spirit of Episode 3 in it, and then as time went on, they just got worse and worse, in my opinion, because they kind of ran out of ideas. You can only write the same old story, with him remembering Padme and some battle during the Clone Wars. You can only do that so many times, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yep. I can't wait to read the other ones though. I can't wait to read I can't wait to read EU stuff about Vader because most of my EU knowledge has well, it's either before Vader was born or after he died. So because I have not read Clone Wars, I haven't read, early like Phantom Menace era period stuff or Dark Times or Rebellion. I haven't read any of that.
Phantom Menace. Well,
So it's gonna be fun to get to that stuff.
yeah, Anakin is a pretty good character in the EU. Well, a lot better than the movies, I think, in my opinion. And then as far as
I'm
Darth
sure.
Vader, yeah, as far as him as Darth Vader, um, Rise of Dark Lord, Rise of Darth Vader, that's a good one. Um, Trying to think what else. Yeah. There's not really that much
Um,
in Dark Time. I mean, they have the Dark Times comic series, but Purge comics, definitely read those. It's more comic form, really.
yeah, not a lot of novels on him.
Yeah, I mean, he's in
Well, he's
Death
in
Star,
novels, but he's not. There's no novels. There's like the Darth Vader novel, but there's really no novels on him other than that one.
right? Right. He's in Death Star, but Death Star basically follows episode. Like a good chunk of the book is episode 4, and then there's some extra stuff. That's the only really interesting part. It's a good book. Has short chapters. It's a really easy read. Um, but not too much as Darth Vader. Shadows of the Empire too. That's another one.
Oh yeah, definitely for sure. He's big in that one. There was also a kind of unpopular opinion, but I enjoyed the little bit of Shizor that we saw in Bounty Hunter Wars than I did Shadows of the Empire because I don't know, I just enjoyed him. Mainly that scene that he had with Vader and Palpatine, I just thought was just really cool. Um, just to see
Yeah,
those three interact like that was just really, really cool.
I felt the writing was off a little bit in the Bounty Hunter Wars for all the characters, really, especially Boba Fett and Dengar and Bosk, and I
It's
don't
such a
know.
shame because
Yeah,
those books had the ingredients to be a freaking amazing trilogy, but it's like it was used all wrong. So, and there's a lot of cool concepts like Kuat and the Kuat family and learning about Kuat. I mean, my goodness, that planet manufactured most of the Imperial Navy. So it was cool to see them and explore them, but they were used in just a bad way.
it was
Um,
definitely an odd trilogy. There was hints that like Boba Fett may have at the very beginning, I think of Mandalorian armor, where Luke's aunt and uncle get killed and the homestead gets set on fire. Like there's hints like Boba Fett was there, and it's just an odd trilogy because most of the Bantam stuff was written after the films. Obviously, you have the Tales from Mos Eisley and that stuff, and then you have the Han Solo trilogy, which is before. But to have it during the films or in between the films is interesting.
yeah, and the more they kind of, because they kept adding, like, when they started mentioning Luke's homestead and then having a connection with Shizor, I'm like, this is just so. This
It's
just
like
makes the universe so small.
right.
Kind of the first thing I thought of.
It's sort of like the Zon trope in Allegiance and Choices of One, where Luke just crossed paths like ships passing in the night
Yeah,
of him and him and Mara Jade. Um, it's a little too much of a coincidence. And Zahn has that a lot, even in the classic Zahn trilogy, like Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, Last Command. There's too much coincidence of like the Falcon passing Luke's X-wing, and two people being at the same spot at the same time.
yeah, yeah. It's very Dave Filoni. esque.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where he learned it from. He learned it from Zahn.
I mean, Zahn did expand the universe quite a bit. There's a lot of new
Oh yeah,
characters, a lot of new planets, a lot of new species. So good on him for doing that. But it still feels like, compared to everything else, the Thrawn trilogy and even the Hand of Thrawn trilogy seems like a smaller universe. You know,
yeah.
Zahn basically sticks to his own characters. Like he uses some Mike Stackpole stuff, and here and there he'll grab some extra stuff, but not too much.
Well, I do think that was kind of what they were doing just in general because he's not the only author to do that. Where his books and comics or her, they're each author kind of had their own sandbox, which I personally enjoyed. I like that because it's like you see an author on the cover, and like, oh, I know who's going to be kind of in this, and you kind of have a general. I guess for some people that may be bad, but I can see that. But I don't know. I never minded that. But
Yeah.
I think Hand of Thrawn makes up for though, because that duology. The more I think about the duology, the more I love it. I really want to reread it
Uh,
because it's just great. The Empire of the Hand stuff, the Sunterfell stuff in those books.
I was a
Just
little disappointed with the villains, the bad guys, and then you get a kind of a, well, I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't read it, but I thought the end was pretty cheap, and the extended Luke and Mara scenes just kind of drove me nuts.
oh,
Um,
I love those scenes. Those were fun. It was really cool to see more of them interact because we didn't really see a lot of that in the other Bantam books, other than the Thrawn trilogy. But
well,
I don't know. I liked it.
Luke has a love of the week, or girlfriend of the month, whatever it is.
Yeah, girlfriend
Um,
of the month. There you
pretty
go.
much pretty much every book, yeah. And I can understand why
Look,
they
fun.
put him with Mara Jade, but I felt like, eh, I don't know, rubbed me the wrong way a little bit.
Well, I've always known it, and like that. I've always seen Luke and Mara as a thing. So,
Yeah,
because I
I
remember
mean,
growing up, and
yeah.
I would watch lore videos, and people, like, yeah, Luke married a hot red chick named Margie. I'm like, oh, that's so cool, bro. We should do that in the movies. He did it.
Yeah. Was that before or after you saw the sequel films?
Um, I think that was around the time of when Force Awakens came out.
Uh,
Yeah, because I remember when I don't remember what video it was. I know it was a Lore Masters video. I think that's his YouTube channel. Anyway, it was some YouTuber and he was making a lore video, and at the front he put like a little um like at the beginning of the video it said, this information comes from the EU/Legends universe. I'm like, wait, what is that? What does that mean? This is like 2015, 2016. And
uh,
I'm like, what does that even mean? So I look it up and I'm like, oh wait. So there were books, loads of them that came out even before Disney bought Star Wars that told the story after Jedi.
yeah, man, that's all we
That
had.
yeah, but like I never thought that was explored in any way. I thought no one just knew what happened. But that was, because I that's just what I grew up. I never knew about the EU.
Yeah.
So
I just thought Mara's Mara's kind of an edgy character, kind of, part smuggler, part Jedi, part everything else that Luke's not. And I can see how opposites attract in some manner, but I think she would have been better for Lando. Just saying.
definitely see that. And that's very foreign to think about, but I can see it and understand it for sure.
Yeah. And Barbara Hamley, I mean, she got the nod to write specifically to have Luke's love interest, create a story about her, and never turned out to be. But that's because Zahn has more pull, I guess.
Well, I do feel like when Mara Jade was first created, she was always intended to be at the very least, a long-term love interest for Luke, which is why I don't understand this idea that Luke has hated Mara Jade. There's no evidence for it. The only thing that they have is a J.W. Rensler quote. This guy, who matters more, Michael Stackpole or J.W. Rensler? Stackpole says something completely different. He said it was a whole rumor. Stackpole knows Zahn. He helped write Mara Jade with Zahn. So I don't know.
Well, the first thing that came, well, I mean, the first thing arguably that came out was Dark Empire, and was it Gem Yasana? She
Yeah.
dies, unfortunately. Spoiler alert. But uh, I think at the beginning of the Jedi Academy trilogy, it's mentioned that Luke has a couple candidates initially for his academy, and he mentions Mara Jade, but they're not together after Zahn's trilogy. She's out on
Yeah.
her own doing whatever with Lando, by the way. But there's a couple other. I mean, there's Callista, then there's Akana, kind of jumps around. They eventually go back and settle on Mara, but I would do it differently. If it was me, I would put Zahn in his place. Have some other authors take the reins, because Christine Catherine Rush, she was supposed to be the architect going forward, before they switched to Del Rey. She was supposed to be the James Lucino of whatever New Jedi Order project. Obviously,
Why?
they knew that they were going to change over.
Why
Well,
her?
that was her position. They brought her in to write that diplomatic corps entrance exam, and she was going to be the top dog there.
That's weird.
Yep.
Really weird. I mean, I'm not opposed. I thought New Rebellion was good, but interesting.
Yep.
Though I think in retrospect, I'm sure, I think we're all happy that Lucino was kind of the architect going forward, not her,
Mm-hmm.
because his books are better. But
Well, most of them are. Yeah.
Yeah.
well, he was the architect behind New Jedi Order, and that's the best thing the EU ever made, so will ever make. So
Yeah. Part of it has to do with the amount of free writing that they got. They got a 19-book series. They got to flesh out Jason and Jaina, and they had a lot more freedom than they did in the Bantamir. I think that, plus they had the benefit of everything that had come before. They didn't need to create characters in a universe and all this stuff. They had it to work with already.
that's a fair point. Honestly, if the New Jedi Order was 10 books longer, I would have been fine with it. Really would have been.
You
I would
know,
have rather have had that.
I
What's
would
up,
have.
Alex?
Hey, how you doing? I was gonna say, I do love New Jedi Order, and I'm going through it now. I'm on Destiny's Way, and I love them all. Fourth Heretic Trilogy is a bit of a slog sometimes, but I still enjoy it. But
I agree.
I don't think. I think if anything, because I like Legacy of the Force and Fate of the Jedi, but I think these super long series, you can only do that for so long. And I feel like 19 books, maybe a perfect 20, because it's a little annoying that it's on an uneven number. But I don't think it could have gone indefinitely unless they did a bunch of different side characters and we got to see different aspects of the war. That could have been cool, but like another 10 books with this whole plot, I feel like it would have got really stale because it already started to feel like that by Balance Point, and then Edge of Victory brought it back up again, and then just kept that momentum as we learned more and more about the Vong, and then Anakin and everything, and then Jason and Traitor. So like you had stuff to keep you like invested. Um, but I feel like if they had another 10 books, it would have got stale real quick.
Yeah,
Personally.
they had a lot to work with in terms of they had to flesh out Anakin's story, they had to flesh out Jason's story, and the Danny Quee, and all
Yeah.
these different characters. But I think that the main villain, the main menace, right, Yuuzhan Vong. I mean, you had the Peace Brigade and other side villains, but the main villain didn't really change. Obviously, the War Master changed, and you got more and more information of how the Yuuzhan Vong work and their internal struggles and the Shapers and the Shamed Ones and all that. But I felt like it got a little stale, and there were books that were kind of character perspectives, like Trader. I mean, Trader was good, but
Trader's my favorite book, but yeah.
You can only do that for so long. You need a mix of action and climactic events like the taking of Coruscant and all that stuff. You need to mix it in together. Some of it was done well. Other things, like you said, Force Heretic trilogy, that was a tough one to go through. I know people like Pelion as a character.
Oh, I love a lot of stuff in that trilogy, but it's still a slog to get through.
Yeah, it was still a little troublesome to get through.
I think it starts out so strong because Vector Prime, you know nothing, right? Like you start out, like if you don't know anything about the EU, you go in fresh and you're reading Vector Prime. This is new, this is fresh, this is intriguing. But the more and more you get to know, the more stale it kind of becomes. And by balance point, I kind of got the gist of what the Vong were about at this point. I got the gist of their technology. I got the gist of the religion. I got it. So then it started to feel like, okay, well, now this is getting old. But then you got Edge of Victory, where it was a big Anakin and Takiri piece. So that was like a big boost up. But then also on top of that, we got to learn about the Shane ones, which we hadn't had anything about yet. So that was something to get me invested again, because I didn't know anything about the Shane ones, And then you have Star by Star, which is a super big Empire Strikes Back, thing for the entire series, where we have a big character death and it moves a lot of the plot threads moving forward. So that one obviously held my attention, and then that momentum kind of sticks through. I think as I did my reread, I love the EU connection in Enemy Lines 2, but at the same time, if I'm looking at it objectively, what a massive waste of time in the grand scheme of things, because it's this whole side plot that doesn't advance the plot whatsoever. It's this complete, like, literally the main plot of the overarching story with Borealis and Jaina fighting the Vong is 20% of Enemy Lines 2, whereas it was the majority in the last book. And 80% of it is Luke and friends on Coruscant killing this evil Jedi dude.
Yeah,
I mean, it's cool, but what does this have to do with the main plot? Nothing. So, and then that happens again in Force Heretic, which, again, I love Truce of Bakura, and I love that they revisit it, but that might as well, in video game terms, be a massive side quest, whereas almost nothing to do with the main plot.
Right, and I think they could have handled Eric. Was it Eric Irisman? Is the name of the guy that shows up in Children of the Jedi and then later on Enemy Lines? I thought he would have been better suited to Centerpoint Station because of his use of like the Eye of Palpatine. Like it's a similar concept, right?
Yeah.
Rather than being a monster on Coruscant. I mean, still cool, but I don't know if the connection is there as much.
It would have been fine maybe if they did this after New Jedi Order, like have this be a thing where, like, because of the events of New Jedi Order and retaking Coruscant and unifying Force, he kind of awakens from his slumber, and that's something the heroes have to deal with for a single novel. That could have been cool,
right?
But it's just in the middle of a series that has nothing to do with him, so it just feels weird.
Yeah, or he could have got control of Centerpoint Station and
that too
been like a separate villain, separate and apart.
Or you make him an ally, and he can use Centerpoint Station. That could have been interesting too.
That could have been a different way to wrap it up. Exactly. But
yeah. Though I do, I meant you guys were talking about supernatural encounters earlier. Thanks to this book, we have this myth that never existed before about Lord Nyax, which was a thing that is only referenced in this book as being a thing. And then Joe Bongiorno did this whole thing in Supernatural Encounters with the legend of Lord Nyax and what the actual story is behind that. And so that was great. But that's all because of Enemy Lines 2 and like a couple sentences by this guy on Coruscant that's still alive talking about Lord Nyax, because that's kind of the name they just give to Eirik. That's not a name he gives himself, but you know.
Right. And isn't he like General Grievous? I mean, it's been a while since I read the book, but he's like General
So,
Grievous, right?
oh, I mean, he's still a person. He has a bunch of biotic things, or not biotic. He has a bunch of enhancements on him that because the whole thing was him in like technology or whatever in Children of the Jedi. So there's some weird fan art of him like in this like massive black armor. He looks like the Hulk, and he has all these lightsabers and stuff. That's not how he actually looks. They describe him basically looking the same, but he has like these cyber stuff on him, and he's got a bunch. He does have a bunch of lightsabers like attached to him, but he's not this big hulking thing like in this one picture that I've seen online. So
Yeah. I don't know. I would have made it a little bit shorter, I think. Moved on to the next series. And they stopped doing trilogies after that, too. It was all
yeah,
9-book series. I guess they did Dark Nest, but
yeah. I prefer if you're gonna do a longer series. I think I by the end of Fate of the Jedi, I was like, can we please just get? I mean, if the EU ever gets continued, I think we should just go back to trilogies and one-off novels until you get to like the big end of it, where like maybe they defeat Abeloth or whatever, because that's still a thread left open. But you know, the 9 books works better, I think, than 19 because it doesn't feel as much of a slog to get through. But it's still, you know, a little bit like sometimes you feel like there's some padding in there. I felt that a lot in Fate of the Jedi. Like, I think the 4th book by Aaron Olston is like this huge side trip to Dathomir, which, I mean, cool to see Dathomir again, but I don't remember how much it enhances the plot, but still, it felt like a big B plot to the overarching plot. So, Legacy of the Force, I think, was a bit smoother with that, but yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like a long time. I was pretty young when I read New Jedi. I was probably too young, actually. Matt and Chris always say, you know, the books kind of grew with them as they got older.
No, that's fair.
But I was a little bit, you know, I was 12 years old or even younger than that. I think when Vector Prime came out, I was 11, maybe. And it just took so long because time seems to take longer when you're younger.
That's true.
It was like book after book after book, and I was like, oh man, is this ever going to end? And what made it worse was episode 1 was coming out as well, and everything else was prequels. So the only thing that you got that wasn't prequels was New Jedi Order.
Yeah,
you didn't have anything else. You had Vader's Quest and like some of these Tales comics, but there became a time where I didn't care for either. I was like, man, I'm just going to wait till they get done with this. And then I'm going to pick up, I think Tatooine Ghost was like the next novel that wasn't either of those things.
Honestly, I think the best way they could have gone about that, if you wanted more, was do more comics, because they only had Invasion, which came out long after the fact. But if they had done comics alongside the novels and focused on some other characters that weren't a focus in the novels, it could have really had something there, because then not only do you get visualization of the Vong and their technology, but you could also just have a completely separate story, you know, that kind of just shows different aspects of the war, make it feel more like this grand scale everywhere sort of thing.
Well, that's what they were supposed to have. They were supposed to have the Invasion comics run concurrently to the book series, and that would have been great, you know, to have a visual alternative to that. Plus, they had things like Crimson Empire 3 was supposed to come out 2001, never did.
Right.
And, well, it did 10 years later. And then they were so wrapped up in the Republic comic series, which was okay during that point. I mean, they were starting to develop Quinlan Voss as a character. Ayla came in, but it didn't really ramp up until the Republic Clone Wars, I think.
Yeah.
All of that paid off. Like,
wasn't even Republic till like issue 40 or something like that. The first 30 were just called Star Wars.
Yeah, I think like after Stark Hyperspace War, they started calling it Republic or something. But yeah, it was Outlander was good, and there was a couple series, Darkness, Twilight. I don't know. It all paid off with the Clone Wars series. So
pretty much all the Quinlan Voss stuff I liked before the Clone Wars, when we finally got to the Clone Wars stuff. And then Keanu Mundy's first 6 issues were a little weird. I don't know. I mean, it was okay, but it wasn't my favorite thing. Then he got to Outlander, though, and I was like, oh, massive step up. I like that a lot. So, and Ayla Secura's not Ayla, well, Ayla Secura too, but then also Aura Singh were both really cool characters. So I enjoyed reading about both of them, and realizing that Ayla came out in the comics long before episode 2 even aired, which means that Lucas read those and decided to include her in the movie, which I thought was awesome.
Right, and it's so obvious in Prelude to Rebellion, the Kiadi-Mundi one. It was so obvious that was written before episode 1, or he got the script of episode 1, because then in episode 1, or is it 2, that they said the Jedi don't get married,
something like that. But
yeah.
I like it in hindsight though. It really helps with the with what Lucas is trying to go for in the prequels. I think it worked out pretty well. But I know a lot of people have issues with the prequels, but something to show for hypocrisy of the Jedi of the Old Republic is, yeah, I mean, usually Jedi can't get married, but Kiadi-Mundi, like, his race kind of needs to procreate, or like they're not gonna. So like we'll make exceptions, even though Kiadi-Mundi is a clear example of having attachments to his family and not turning to the dark side. You think that'd be a big like in their favor for realizing, well, that's stupid, but they don't, and they keep their hypocrisy, being like, well, he can do it. He's the one exception, but the rest of us got to stay celibate. Can't have attachments. So I think it works retrospectively for showing some of the errors of the prequel Jedi.
Yeah.
They even mentioned that, I think, in No Prisoners by Karen Travis, and I know they mentioned it in Republic Commando. So
even just the art style of like some of those older comics, it just feels so different than say 2005, 2006. It started, the drawing started to get better. They got better artists, but stylistically it's a lot different.
Yeah, that too. I did like seeing Effin Mon though in those first 6 issues. I thought it was interesting to see him in a prequel era. So
yeah, he's supposed to be like a henchman of Jabba, and that wasn't really well widely known. Like they always put him with Bib Fortuna, but like Enfotmon was supposed to be a gangster, like of his own right,
His little short story in Tales from Jabba's Palace is one of my favorites.
Yeah,
like when he like genuinely goes to Jabba, he's like, you need to not, if you go on that barge, you're not going to come back. You are my friend. I'm one of the few friends you actually legitimately have, because everyone else is kissing up to you or afraid of you. I'm telling you, don't go. And this is Jabba episode 6, where he's super drunk and high all the time. So he just tells him to F off and meets his demise. So I was surprised how much I cared about Effin Mon and his friendship with Jabba, because I guess Jabba saved him once.
right.
Took a bullet for him.
He's the only loyal one. Like everybody else is trying to kill Jabba. There's some plot to kill Jabba in like all those other stories except his. And I'm a big fan of the Decipher card game, and Enfotmon kind of like his card plays well with Jabba, and that's sort of like a big combo. And there's like decks revolving around that. It's like Buello, which is the special edition guy. He's in that one special edition scene in was it episode 4, and Enfotmon and a couple others. Like that's a whole crew in a scum deck. It works really well.
Awesome. That's the great thing about the expanding universe. Expanding things makes watching episode 4 and 6 so much better, because I look at that fat guy crying over the Rancor. I'm like, what happened? Why is he crying? And then you read the story by Kevin Janderson. You're like, oh my god, he was gonna help him escape. They're gonna be friends. And then Luke slaughtered him, so he can't do it now. It was great.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of comedic elements to work with, like the fat dancer and the chef, just all these crazy things, like the sail barge captain or whatever.
Yeah. Hate the Anzati though. Pretty racist against them, because since the movie, or not, I guess not the movies, but since the EU has only ever portrayed them in a bad light, they scare me and I hate them. Their whole concept terrifies me, and I wish them all ill will, because they have not shown me a single good one in any of the EU. So that's led me to assume they are all bad. So, uh,
Yeah, there's supposed to be not that many of them. Like they're
yeah.
um, like trained oceans. That's another species that they say there's not many of them around, or their population is low.
Yeah.
And the Anzati, they live a long time, right? They're like vampires. They don't.
Yeah, they're basically Star
Yeah,
Wars
yeah,
vampires. Instead of biting your neck and sucking your blood, they stick their freaking worm things up your nose and eat your brain juices, and it's invasive and gross, and I hate it. It's the same sort of body horror as like Alien,
right,
or The Thing, and I hate it. I hate the it's more about the violation, I think, because like a little like kiss on the neck as you die, that doesn't sound too bad. But having some weird tentacle thing go up your nose before you die sounds awful. So no, thank you. I'm good.
yeah. Yeah, just like the Night Lily character that,
All right,
or I
yeah,
guess kills their mate or something. Kills them after they mate or something,
yeah.
so that they have enough time to continue on the line. But
I actually rooted for her at the end though, because that Godel guy was just like one of the absolute worst examples of men, and so he kind of got his comeuppance at the end. So it's kind of comedic. So
it's so odd that he's after Kenobi. That
yeah,
it's so crazy. He's on the hunt. He's like a inquisitor, sort of like quasi
yeah.
inquisitor, and then he's like all obsessed over collecting taxes for the Empire. I mean, he's an alien. Isn't he supposed to be oppressed by the Empire? Isn't that
Yeah.
a thing?
Well, that's also it's like, well, it's the I do the taxes thing, so the humans leave me alone. It's a kind of like for some reason when I read it, it reminded me of like Matthew from the Bible before he was Matthew the Bible, where he's like a tax collector.
That's
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
what it's based on. Yeah,
yeah.
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 I can see that.
Except he doesn't meet Jesus. He meets his end because he had sex with someone who eats him afterwards.
Right. He thought he had the upper hand there, but she
Yeah,
was actually scoping him out before.
yeah, yeah. It just makes going back and watching the movie so much fun because you get to watch that cantina scene, you get to watch Jabba's palace in a whole new light, and it's one of the things, one of the missed opportunities of the EU is the prequels doing that, which I know there's a fan fiction that's trying to be created right now where uh, one of the Ken Palpatines is trying to get a whole bunch of writers to come in and write stories for the prequel era, where it's like the tales from um, the pod races, tales from I think the bar that Anakin and Obi-Wan go to in Episode 2 when they're chasing the Claudite, and then
Oh, really?
the Tales of the Opera. Yeah, that's what they're working on right now, and I thought that would have been great to actually have an EU as like actual stories to flesh out. What's that bald lady that Palpatine sends off up to? What's all those
Right.
crazy looking aliens and the
They
pod
had a lot
racing?
of that in the Wizards of the Coast games. Like you can almost tell in the prequel films where they create those short story collections, like the pod race on
Mm.
Tatooine, and then you'd
Oh.
have a one on, like you said, the nightclub on Coruscant, Episode
Mm.
2. You probably have one in the Opera House for Episode 3 or something like that.
Yeah.
So
I was just thinking like one of those aliens in the pod race that's Bulba ends up killing, you know, have some tragic backstory. He's trying to make ends meet, feed his kids or something like that, and then some Bulba just kills him during the race. The next time you watch episode 1, you're just in tears. This poor guy dies, or something. I don't know. I think it's been great.
right. The real tragedy is they took out that deleted scene of the one of the pod racers has a family, and it says, like, when they announce him, oh, he just has a new son or something, or Mrs. whatever pod racer just gave birth or something, and then he dies, and the pod racer has like a crazy crash or something.
That would have
It's
been
so
great.
sad.
Yeah.
Some of
The,
those
the
deleted,
Tales of the Announcers with the two heads, that would have been cool too. What are they up to? What do they
right.
do outside of that? Yeah.
Right. And you were mentioning the Night Lily character, like that's another card in the card game that has a crazy ability. So basically, you can pay a lot of force to use her ability, and all the unique male characters of your opponent in their hand, like get sent to the graveyard.
Yeah,
It's a really crazy ability. They had to create a card just to counter that.
that's great. It reminds me of the Fallout video games. If you play as a female, there's a certain perk you can get called I forget what it's called. It's like the Black Widow perk or something, where like you can convince men if you have a high enough charisma skill to go into bed with you, and then you can kill them in their sleep or something like that. But it's like only an option for like the opposite sex, which I thought was funny. I didn't really use that very often because there's really no need to just kill most people you don't want alive. But it was just funny.
Yeah, there's just a lot of crazy strategies like scanning crew. You could just scanning crew, and then your opponent has nothing to deploy. Or you could Milo Unith because she's a dark side character, and all the light side characters are mainly male, like Lucan, Chewie. The only female characters you're playing are Leia, maybe Carrie Neth, one of the X-wing pilots or something. But you really don't have many female characters, so you're pretty much screwed as far as deploying anything.
Yeah. Also, I didn't. I came in a bit late. What is it? Because you don't have a physical copy, or what's up with you in Supernatural Encounters? I missed the end part of that.
Who, me or Lance?
Yeah, you with not reading
So
it.
I have a copy. I have it. I was telling Lance, after so many years of defending it and propping it up and stating its importance, I feel like I have no interest in reading it now.
Oh,
It's pretty sad. I mean, I did read the original version years ago.
I mean, there's a lot more there.
Yeah, but
sure.
when I started to read I read the first chapter, so it was basically that. I know there's more to it. It's 1,100 pages, but
Yeah.
I feel like, do I really want to? Especially after people saying there's so much added from other franchises and stuff like that. I'm like,
well, Scott, I will say I've read it all.
okay,
I would say, in my opinion, I know there's a whole debate of how, how canonicity wise it is. I think it is, but I'm not going to get into that in the stream. But if I'm considering it EU, I have it in my top 3. I genuinely think it's one of the best written books that Star Wars has been able to produce. Like just writing wise, it's up there. And these things that people mention of other references, right? They're spaced out. It's not like you're gonna every single page. It's this, it's that, and every single thing. It may just be a nod, because Joe has said multiple times he's not gonna. I've asked him, "Is this? Are you actually saying this is a thing?" And he says, "I'm not giving you my answer because I want people to interpret it however they want."
no, I know
Yeah.
that's a good stance to have, but the issue is, why do you touch on everything and have to have everything have a defined origin or ending? See, I don't like that kind of thing that just tries to tie up a lot of loose ends, just for the sake of ending it. I'd rather have a story about each one. So I don't know.
There's a lot of stories in there.
Okay.
Lots and lots of stories. There's a lot of parts that are more like the Bible, where it's kind of just like information.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a lot of story in there. Like I think one of the achievements that Joe did with this book is making you genuinely feel for the Bedlam spirits, for these weird abstract things from a weird and bizarre Devil Worlds comic by Alan Moore, and making them. They're not people. They're more than people, because they're like these godlike things, but making you like somehow sort of relate to them. And that's one of the cheat. And Marcel can attest to this. Maxine can attest to this. Ken, Al, Brennan can all attest to this. Like it's got some of the most phenomenal writing you'll ever find in any Star Wars book out there. I honestly put it up. I put it ahead of Lucino in terms of connections and writing. I put it above Darth Plagueis, which is really hard for me to say, but I generally put it above there. I think
Okay.
it's really
And
good.
is that because it impressed you as far as the references and the ability to weave everything together, or is it actually well written in terms of high literature?
Both. I think honestly, most EU works are good, but you read them because it has the Star Wars title on it. I don't think a lot of things would be as popular as they were if it didn't have the Star Wars label on it. Like if this was not a Star Wars property, I would still say this is one of the best written books that the EU has to offer.
Hmm.
I put it up there because it feels a lot like H.P. Lovecraft and other stuff like that, where it's not like old timey like that, but it harkens back to a lot of that like sort of like classical literature. And there are some actual like story stuff because there's a lot of Bible like, and this happened and this happened, where it's like kind of just stating stuff and not really like giving you a story behind it. But there is a lot of moments where it'll stop and like just take a whole like couple of chapters to just talk about this specific moment in history.
Okay.
So like Lord Nyax is one of those examples. There's stuff with we'll just delve into our whole Hextrafon's past. Like there's this whole section with his dad on this farm where they just kind of talk about the world and Arhol's place in it, and because he originally wanted to be like a reporter, and he was talking about like injustice in the world, and how do I report that and see that all the time and not do anything about it, and
Okay. I
so
see.
there's stuff in there. There's actual stuff to digest and appreciate in there, and like I said with the Bedlam spirits, there's a lot of moments where after all the crazy Bible stuff, where there's a bunch of information stuff thrown your way, they'll talk about the events of the world going on as time has passed on, and their place in it, and that's some of the most fascinating parts of the whole book. So
Okay.
I do recommend giving it a shot. If maybe you still won't like it, there are references that may be a bit annoying to people. And I can't do anything about that. Because I know a lot of people dislike that there are any references whatsoever. But that's not like the book. That's not like every chapter's this and that and that. It's not this whole fan service thingy-majig. Like it's in there somewhat sometimes. But I will say, just for context, there is Sky River. That universe is Star Wars, the universe of Star Wars.
Right.
Because one of the things that he tried to explain is because in Star Wars there's a lot of near human species. They're basically just humans, but slightly different.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, as fans and Joe, were like, that's kind of weird. So like, where's the origin of all that? Why are there so many species that look basically just humans but are a different species for some reason? So there's a lot of things with like Earth, with alien exodus being a thing in the past, but kind of using alien exodus as like, well, here's the origin point, and then some humans through the Infinity Gates from that were in the Quinlan Voss comics we were talking about earlier during the Dothmiri arc, where there was this ancient Infinity Gate by the Quoth
Right.
that gets destroyed. So they use that as a means of, well, there was a mass immigration from some other galaxy to the Star Wars one. But
Right.
but by the time that Star Wars actually begins, like even if you go to Dawn of the Jedi, those things don't really exist anymore. Like the Quinlan Voss finds like one of the last ones out there. So like people can't go back. So there's an entirely different history going on in that original place that's completely separate from Star Wars. So that's where most of those other stuff references gets mentioned. So like, yes, it's a little annoying, but at the same time, it's like, first off, you don't even have to take it as actually being legit, because it could just all be BS, as the book seems to imply that it could be if you want to take it that way. But it's also, if you want to take it as true that this stuff is actually happening, it's happening in a completely different galaxy that no one can touch. It's basically like our galaxy.
Yeah,
essentially.
I'm not so worried about the story or impactful things that he writes about. I was more taken aback by the references to other franchises getting weaved in there just because. But I guess you're saying there's a reason for each of those appearing.
Yeah,
and I have been following Marcel's streams a little bit to the extent that I can. I've been crazy busy, but I'm not saying I won't read it ever. I'm just saying like right now. Even if I have a couple minutes during the day, I don't feel the need to pick it up. And partially it's because it's a heavy read. There's a lot of
No, yeah,
references. You have to look stuff up. So I mean, it's not your
yeah,
casual, pick it up
yeah.
for 10
It's
minutes a
it's
day.
yeah, it's definitely more of I kind of tried to power through it because I knew that Marcel was going to do his more in-depth thing and that Brennan would release his videos. And I wanted to see what the gist of it was about, so I wouldn't, when people try to critique it, I could, adequately explain what the whole thing's about. So I kind of pushed through it. So there's a lot of references I did miss. So Marcel's videos have been helping me with that and everything. But I don't think you necessarily need to study it that in depth, at least the first time through, but it is something you want to be able to devote some time to actually allow yourself to get invested. I'll say the weakest points or the parts where you'll be the most disinterested are books 4 and the end of 3 and a little bit of 5, because there's a lot of here's information and this and that and that. But in between all that, especially at the end of book 5 and with book 6 entirely and books 1 and 2, there's a lot of story in there and actually like stuff to digest other than connection to another part of the EU. So I think it balances out that way. But when it gets really good, it's really good in terms of the story and whatnot. And when there's actually like dialogue being had between characters and it's not just information, I think that's some of the best parts of the entire book. So yeah, I do think sometime definitely worth at least now. And if you still dislike it, after reading all of it, that's completely fair. But I definitely think you should never just not touch it.
Oh, I didn't say that. I'm
No.
never
Oh,
gonna
that's
not
fair.
touch it. I'm just saying
That's
it
fair.
doesn't pique my interest at the
That's fair.
moment in terms of a casual read. So
No, that's completely fair.
Well, you know what piques my interest?
what?
Going to bed.
Huh? Going to bed? Is that what you said?
I think that's what I'm gonna do.
That's
Yeah,
fair.
I think it's that time.
It is that time. It is way too late. But thank you guys for joining.
Sure
Thanks for
thing.
having us.
And Fine Editions also joined, but that was it. I did stream late, so
Mm,
but thank you all for joining. Y'all have a good night.
See ya.
you too.
Bye.
Bye.